Hi, my name is Ernie Kleinman. In the last segment, we talked about all different kinds of kerfing, blocks, and bracing patterns for the top and back of the Hawaiian Tenor Ukulele. In this segment, I'll show you what I've actually done since the last segment was shot. I put in the tentallones, which are the little small glue blocks, that's the Spanish word for them, all around the sides of the tenor ukulele. I've also put on the back a solid lining for the back, and I put in the glue blocks. The rear block is about 5/8 of an inch by the length of the block, which is about 70 millimeters or 15 millimeters in thickness, and the top one is really thick. The reason this one is 1.5 inches thick is because I will be dovetailing in a later segment the neck onto the block. I do not like using the Spanish heel method because it's extremely difficult to slip the block out and repair the neck. So the Spanish method uses an integral neck and heel block combination. And this one we basically just have a thick block over here which will accept the dovetail joint from the neck in a later session on carving the neck. The other thing I'd like to point out and discuss is bracing patterns. On this western cedar, red western cedar top, it's been thickness to about 2.5 millimeters, or roughly 3/32 of an inch. And there's many different kinds of bracing patterns. Basically in this one I've got a top brace, 3 braces around the sound hole, a large bridge block over here, and a small one right in front of the back block. And the reason for that, this bridge brace over here, is to accommodate the pull of the strings on the top. Typically on older ukuleles you find a sunken top over here because what's happened is because of the lack of the bracing underneath the bridge plate here creates a cavity on the top which changes the action of the ukulele and makes the whole kind of top cave in and flatten out. So bracing is really important. And as I mentioned in the other previous shows, that what happens over here is this is all interconnected. The thickness of the top, the bracing, and so on and so forth. These braces are here are very, very thin to accommodate the thin spruce top. You don't want too thick and you don't want too thin. I usually tap while I'm tuning the braces a little bit to get a particular drum-like sound that I'm looking for. I've also cut out the sound hole for this tenor uke, and I've used maple for the bridge plate because this is going to be an 8-string eventually, and I want something thick in there to withstand all the tension that's going to be coming on the top. You need an extra big bridge plate to accommodate the pull, the extreme tension. You've got twice as much tension on an 8-string tenor as you do on a 4-string. So keep that in mind. You can also make the bridge plates out of a thinner and softer wood like spruce, western red cedar, mahogany. I particularly used maple over here because it's a lot stronger and a lot tougher. So experiment and find out which woods work well for you. Another thing I didn't discuss in the past tutorials was climate and the effects on instrument making. Ideally, you want to build your uke, guitar, or whatever you're building in an atmosphere between 60 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit and between 40 and 50% humidity in a room, because what happens if it's too humid, you're going to get too much flexing on the top and the back, and wood expands and contracts. If it's too dry, it's below 40%, if you live in the desert, you might want to add a little bit of humidity because otherwise your top and your back will crack for sure. So the ideal is to work between that 40 to 50% relative humidity and between 60 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly between 10 to 12 degrees centigrade and let's say 21 to 22 degrees centigrade for people who are watching in countries that use the metric system. Here is another sample, that was the top, of the back. And this sample demonstration, I've used an American sycamore back or plane tree, as it's called in Europe, which is a very similar wood, and I put a piece of Ipe and Baltic birch in the middle as a center stripe. And this wood, which is common through the Middle West and the eastern parts of the United States, has a lot of shrinkage and a lot of movement. It moves very easily. So I basically, it looks very unorthodox, but I basically used a double set of braces here to accommodate that. And if you check carefully with a ruler on the back, you'll see, you can't see it here in the video, but there's a bit of a curve from side to side, okay? And that's created to create sort of a doming effect on the back of the ukulele. And I've doubled up the braces here because this wood is notorious for moving. Some woods are more stable, like mahogany, and also it also depends on the climate. Koa is also got a little bit more movement than this, but it's probably a little bit more stable than this American sycamore or buttonwood, as it's known in some places. So keep that in mind. Be creative in your use of different kinds of woods. In this section over here, I've used a pine center strip, and I've used quarter sawn pine for the back braces, making them very thin. You could also experiment and use a thicker brace, meaning taller. I would make it 3/8 of an inch wide and maybe 3/4 of an inch high, and work it down from there to see how much movement you get on your back. Another thing that I haven't shown here in the back is after I assembled the sides, I put in a butt strip with a contrasting piece of wood. In this case, we used American walnut, against the sycamore, because contrasting a dark wood with a light wood, or contrasting a light wood butt strip with a dark wood, like let's say walnut. And that is the little talk we've had on woods, braces, and gluing them into the form. And the next sequence will be on actually gluing the top or the back first, whichever you prefer, on the tenor ukulele while it's sitting in the form.